Mark, in the previous video, you shared with us what true voice is. And of course, we're going to go back to that. But for now, I would love to know, how did you discover it? I mean, you started out as a regular singer and then you taught singing lessons. That was not a process, it wasn't therapy. It wasn't meant to be therapy. So here we are many years later and you've discovered this process. What happened? I'm sure it was a process, discovering the process, but
Yes.
I'm sure there was also a seminal moment. Or not, I don't know. I'm curious.
Okay. Probably there were several seminal moments when I look back on it. You know, these kinds of questions, it's a really good question. It's a question that you can only kind of answer when you've gone far enough along the way that you can take a look back and start to see how that led to that and that led to that. Because at the time, you don't always know where it's going or what it means. And it's only, you know, when at the end of it, not the end of the journey maybe, but you know, where you've at the end of a certain phase of the journey maybe, that you can look back and the narrative starts to form and you start to see how that led to that and so forth. And I would say, and basically I would just, what's the word? It probably sounds too much, but I was really sort of ignorant. I mean, I didn't know anything. I gave my first singing lessons. It was the middle of my 20s, and I was in San Francisco. And I remember I just won this big competition. I was a winner in a very big competition in San Francisco called the Maryland program. And I was this is something every singer in America wanted to be a part of opera singer wanted to be a part of the Maryland program, and they only took 4 tenors that year out of the entire United States, New York and Miami, and all of those auditions. And I was one of those 4 tenors, and I thought that was pretty cool. I thought, oh, hey, I'm really starting a career here. And when the program was over, I was in San Francisco, and my teacher was getting a lot of requests for lessons. He was already retired. And he said to one lady, he said, you know, well, Mark gives lessons, which was sort of true. Well, almost true.
It was going to be true.
It was going to be true. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Russian lady named Sonia. I remember this is like 40 years now. And she was that time 50 years old, I think, 50, 51 years old. And she was a beautiful, dramatic Russian mezzo-soprano. And she had a voice like this. I mean, it wasn't a little, lovely little instrument. I mean, it was a big instrument. I mean, huge. It was a dramatic mezzo, and it was fabulous voice. And she had sung 25 years professionally. She was a seasoned stage performer. But in all those 25 years, and this was her, I suppose you would call it tragedy, I guess, as a singer, was that she had this big, incredibly beautiful sound. I mean, it would just knock you over. But it had what we call in English a wobble in it, that the vibrato was not stable. It wasn't a ah kind of vibrato, it was a ah. It had this wobble, this big wave, this incredible amplitude going on. And she had this basically all of her professional life, but the fact that her instrument was so impressive that even with this, what we would think of technically, also aesthetically, as more of a flaw, or certainly a disadvantage for a professional opera singer, although unfortunately a lot of opera singers haven't. She still had a wonderful career, but she went to all the big named, let's call them star singing teachers in San Francisco, and studied with one of them, one after the other with this problem, and hoping that somebody could solve it. Well, it only got worse.
Oh.
And nothing seemed to work for her. And so she came to my teacher. her husband was also a baritone, professional baritone, and he was working with my teacher. That was John DeMerchant, and so she tried it, and he said, "Well, work with Mark. He gives lessons." So it was a kind of wink in the eye and so forth. So I was, I have to tell you, I was totally convinced that I had nothing, I had no chance of teaching a female singer anything. I didn't understand women's voices at all. I watched John and his lessons for many years working with female voices, and it was just like genius how he could just suddenly open up the top and do, you know, help get him into this line and this balance and so forth. And I was just amazed at how fluently and easily just he could do this. And I just felt completely, I just didn't have a clue. And so Sonia came, and I think that was part of why it was such an important experience for me, just because I didn't have any real resources that, or at least that I knew of, to help her. And so I started working with Sonia with no idea what I was doing. And being totally insecure about the results, that I could even help her at all, having a lot of fear connected with it, you know, thinking, oh my God, she's going to find out I don't have a clue what I'm doing. and all this kind of stuff. And but also having a, you know, just a tremendous, I heard her sing, I heard this amazing instrument, I just, it was, wow, this great a sense of respect for who she was as a singer. And so I just started out of nothing with nothing. And I didn't really work with her technically. I just started, I think, for me, I just started with this wonderful impulse to sing that is in so many singers, but also just so-called normal people. And there's a great longing, a great desire to sing, and there's an impulse, you know, it has an emotional quality that wants to go from here to, you know, to silence, to sound. And just going to that impulse in her and Sonia, and then making sure that there was nothing between the impulse to sound to making sound itself, that there was no technical manipulation of any kind, not even a good technical manipulation, to interrupt that journey from impulse to sound itself. And so we were doing simple humming exercises, what we call messa di voce exercises, or just starting breathing and then sound, breathe, sound, breathe, sound. And no manipulation, no placing, no support, no anything. No tricks, no pedagogy, nothing. Just impulse to sound. And we did this for 4 weeks, in 4 lessons. Every week, a new lesson. And in the 4th week, the 4th lesson, we sang from low C to middle C to high C with this incredible, beautiful instrument. And every note was exactly on pitch with this beautiful, pulsing, shimmering vibrato. And the wobble was gone.
Oh my God.
The wobble had vanished.
Oh, wow.
And we did this. And we went all the way up to high C, I remember. And I said, Sonia, just so you know, that was just high C that you sang. And she just burst into tears.
Oh.
Because she had never sung a high C in her life that didn't do this.
Oh my God.
And suddenly she sang a high C that did this.
Oh. Oh.
And she just burst into tears. And it, you know, it moves me now. You know, I almost go into tears, you know, thinking about it. You know, we're reliving that moment that, you know, brought me to tears too. And we just experienced that moment together. And it was like, well, once again, you know, in singing lessons, you're working with technical exercises. Well, we didn't do anything technical. We just did this thing of eliminating everything technical. And it wasn't like we were in a singing lesson. it's like suddenly we were in this incredibly, I would almost call it holy space, where there was just this wonderful sort of sense of grace that had touched us, had touched her and had touched me. And um, and it was overwhelmingly beautiful. It was overwhelmingly beautiful for her and overwhelmingly beautiful for me. And I thought we were just giving singing lessons, and suddenly we landed on with this sort of
spiritual experience.
Yes, spiritual experience, a mystical experience, like we were in some sort of cathedral, of possibilities and of healing, and it was like a miracle that no one did, but there it was anyway, because I didn't do it, I knew that, and she had no idea what happened, but there she was, and suddenly her voice was back to what it was. And I didn't realize it, and I was, you can say I was too dumb, or is too, just too fresh, too inexperienced to know differently. I saw that and I was overwhelmed, and it was like one of the most powerful experiences of my life up to that point. My most powerful experiences up to that point were with music as a singer. And suddenly in this role as a teacher, and I wasn't even teaching her, I was just, Sonia, what would happen if you did this? Just experimenting with the voice and, just seeing if we could get from this to this with nothing in between. That suddenly in this role, though, as a teacher, that I was having, as we say in English now, an epiphany of the most intense kind, of just overwhelming transformation was happening. And I wasn't singing myself at all, and I wasn't on stage singing. I was in the living room sitting at a piano, and this happened to us. And so when you asked me how did this whole thing with True Voice start, it actually happened 40 years ago, giving my very first singing lesson in San Francisco, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and I didn't know it then, but I know it now. That was when it started, and I knew then, I felt then. It wasn't about giving a person a singing lesson and technically improving the voice. It was you feeling, recognizing, appreciating the unbelievable possibilities of, through vocal sound, to go through an intense personal transformation. And that's what just gripped my heart and never let go. And but as I sang on the stage a lot in the 80s, and without going through my biography in detail, but later in the 90s, at the beginning of the 90s, I started giving a lot of singing lessons. I had moved to Europe, moved to Germany, moved to Munich, in schools at the Bayerische Staatsschauspiel at the Bavarian State Theater. I was responsible for the entire ensemble, as well as giving private lessons and having a ball, having a blast, and also, not always, but always, again and again, sometimes coming in touch with this sort of, where the room just seemed to open up in the middle of a singing lessons, and suddenly the person was standing there with this look on their face of absolute awe. And it's hard to define that moment, but you could just see in that moment we're in a space that, once again, it has nothing to do with the singing lesson. And I think that was at a point for me more and more, what is this? And how can I share this with people? Because it's such a wonderful experience for me, and it's such a wonderful experience with other people. And a singing lesson is not really the right framework for it. It helps us to get it in there, but what happens is something really quite different. And there was an amazing chance in 1996 to give a singing seminar. And I thought, sort of like, here's my chance. Here's my chance to just turn this seminar into sort of a laboratory to have experiments to what is happening here, and why is this happening through vocal sound,
Mm-hmm.
And what can we do to encourage this and to share this with more people?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going into the seminar and thinking about it for many weeks in advance and thinking, what is it about? Well, and it always came, well, I don't know what it's about, but it certainly is not about singing lessons.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about? Well, so when I got there was a chance to invite people to go through I call it an opening process with their voice, which is a good description of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where we learn to organically open our voice, where the pharynx has a chance to open, and then different sounds start to come out of us than we're used to, that we know, and so forth. And so I just invited people to go through this opening process with me, and they did, and suddenly we were in a setting. We weren't there as doing singing lessons, where people suddenly, because it was a different setting, they automatically kind of got it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also, in one voice after the other, they were just so deeply touched and so deeply in the sense of a sense of deep reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And also occasionally this astonishment, and this wonderful they were so moved by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is it. And the circumstances were, I gave this little seminar on a weekend in June, I remember. And the following week, after the word of mouth just got out, and within the week, I had offers to do 6 more seminars.
Oh wow!
Just based on that one seminar. Just a week later, I had 6 new seminars.
Wow!
So
something worked.
Something worked. It was the beginning of a journey that I didn't really understand, but was at least smart enough or sensitive enough to realize that here was something that really that integrated some deep spiritual sense of myself and of the world and of ourselves and of the world, and something really, really concrete like the body and the voice and this organic instrument, and it was sort of like this axis between the manifested world, the concrete world, and the mystical world, and the portal of that world, the axis, was the voice, and that's how it started.
Wow. Thank you. And you know what? I would, even though it's dangerous, because this was also a mystical experience listening to you, I would like to have a practical example, or I would like to have this unpacked a little bit of what happened with Sonia. Like you described the exercise that you did, but could you do it for us?
Yeah, sure. Sure. Well, usually for a professional singer, particularly a trained singer, they're always doing something technically. They always have something technical in mind. And what Sonia had learned is what many, many of us learn, that the voice has a certain sort of place where it sits. And we call that a placement. Often a trained voice, and you try to really school that in a voice, has a certain kind of placement, where the voice, at least in my feeling world, sits, you know. And often that voice has a sort of what we call a forward placement, which is, you know, where you feel like it's kind of here. So your voice, let's say it's not here, ah, but let's say it's here, ah, ah. Okay, it's a silly example. I can't do it very well at the moment, but there's a sense of it's kind of foreign here. We say singing in the mask, M-A-S-Q-U-E from the French. Or there's also sometimes where the sound maybe sounds too back, where maybe it's here and then it's it's sort of throaty and not very attractive, but it's a deeper sound, but it, you can feel something that's being manipulated. It's not quite free. It's not quite healthy. And so we did exercises where we would breathe, and where from the breath there would be an immediate going from breath into sound. For example, let me do it softly, where you breathe in and then you breathe out, and then you make the sound before you breathe in again.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, trained singers, when they breathe in, their breathing is also very trained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's also a whole complicated sort of what we call support here.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody does it maybe a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's like breathe in, place, support.
Yeah.
I see this sort of thing. And so what I did with her, which also can be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be harmful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes or no, it's both, depending upon how the singer reacts, how the student reacts. I did this with her. I would have her breathe in and then breathe out.
Mm-hmm.
And before breathing in this space where she had no experience whatsoever, she had no learning experience whatsoever, to sing in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
to ask her to sing.
Could you do it? Could you do it right now?
Yeah, sure I could. Instead of doing this, okay, we normally do this. I asked her to do this. And what happens is a sound with no memory, has no past, has no technique, has no muscle memory to guide it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a quality of, it has something pure about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
She's not doing anything. I'm not giving her a space. I'm giving her this much space, and in this space she doesn't have time to manipulate it.
Mm-hmm. Because she's almost out of breath. And
She's almost out of breath, and she thinks that she doesn't have enough breath anyway. Actually, if you make this experience, if you have this experience, you find often you have just as much breath as you had anyway, not because you actually have more breath, but because the sound that you come up with when you do it this way is so efficient that you can often sing longer than you could if you took a big breath. Let me do it very soft, because I had to also do her soft singing. I said,
Wow.
and I can do it much longer
Oh, wow.
than that, but I'm a show off. But
I almost got out of breath watching you.
yeah, you know.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And most people, they don't know that place. They don't know that place, that inner room where you suddenly have much more breath. Not because you have more breath, but because you have a sound that's so incredibly efficient, that uses the little breath you have in the most optimal fashion. And this is things like this I did with her, with soft singing, with messa de voce singing, with full singing, but always going to a place where I sometimes say the sound that came, there's a wonderful spy novel from Jean Le Carré, The Spy That Came Out of the Cold. And I always call it the sound that came out of the nothingness.
Oh, wow.
Because it doesn't come out of a place, it doesn't come out of an idea, it doesn't come out of this, it comes out of, there's no idea whatsoever. There's no time for an idea, for a concept, for a manipulation. You can do whatever you want with it. You can make lots of colors with it. You can keep it very, very pure. You can add more depth to it. You can make it a little brighter, a little more lyric, a little bigger, whatever. You can make it more pop music. You can make it more opera. But these are the things I did with her, so that that she had an experience that she had never had before.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because of that, she had none of this technical influence,
You could
which
break.
which in one sense had helped her become a professional singer,
Mm-hmm.
but also had somehow created an imbalance in her voice that she didn't know how to repair.
Mm. So these exercises sort of broke her conditioning.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It broke her conditioning. And once again, it's only much later that I understood that, in a sense like I understand through voice now.
Mm-hmm.
The conditioned voice, she was trying to repair the conditioned voice. I was trying to eliminate the conditioned voice.
Oh, that's a good way.
I didn't want to waste our time trying to fix her conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't interested in trying to find a technical solution to a technical problem.
Oh.
I was only interested in that point of getting to something that was simple and pure and direct.
Beyond
again.
the problem.
Yes.
Mm.
And exactly. And beyond the problem,
Mm-hmm.
another way to say it is to find the voice that she had before the problem existed.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And that's the voice that didn't have this trained coordination, but still had a natural coordination.
Mm-hmm.
If we could find it, if we could get back in touch with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, and she did. She found it very quickly.
Mm.
And I think in sense of true voice, because what we're looking for is true voice. Once again, we're looking for the sound that emerges in the absence of the conditioned sound.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what and I didn't know that at the time, but 40 years ago, that's exactly what we were doing. I was too stupid to know that. I was just helpless. And I stayed helpless, and I stayed in that place where I was still scared and so insecure about, but I felt, and not knowing.
Yeah.
And learning only much later that those qualities are exactly what you need.
Yeah.
To get out. Being a teacher is sometimes in the way.
Yeah, so why say that you were stupid? You were innocent.
Yes. Well, that's a much nicer way. Let's say, or
you were innocent, and you yourself were not conditioned as a teacher.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. I was not conditioned. It was my very first lesson. It was my very first student.
Mm-hmm.
And
you didn't put on any airs, but you stepped back and you just gave space for something that could happen.
And it's, I think, that quality that made it possible 40 years ago, and it's the quality that I've learned in True Voice is the quality which makes it work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I'm not the teacher.
Mm.
I'm the learner.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, you're not.
And the voice is what's teaching me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a relationship that works.
Yeah, you're curious and you open up a space.
Yeah.
And you allow things to happen.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that willingness to open that space, the willingness to not know, but to still stay there, the willingness to be scared to death and still stay there, the willingness to not have to be a teacher, and all the, and sometimes there's positive things, wonderful positive things about teachers. Of course there are. Wow, wonderful. There's also there's a teacher's ego, and there's the teacher's goals, and there's the teacher's technique, and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it works really well, it comes together really well, and sometimes it's just a disaster. It doesn't come together at all. But in that moment, it wasn't like I was trying to be a teacher or not trying to be a teacher. I just knew that I didn't know what I was doing. But I was there, and there was an honest willingness, a desire to support her. Yeah. And finding a sound that worked.
You were almost like a doula.
A what?
Like a doula, like
what is a doula?
Someone who helps to give birth. And you can be a voice doula, or you can be a doula for babies, or a doula for books.
Yes.
So you opened up a space for something to be born.
Thank you, and I think that's very good. A doula, it is. You kind of have a role. It's much less a teacher. It's more of a midwife. You sort of midwife.
Yeah,
the sound. Into life again. You let an old primal vibrational aspect of beingness live. Where the conditioning, and we're all profit from it and we all suffer from it, our conditioning. We take advantage of it, we suffer from it. But in that moment with the sound, we come in contact with the sound before the conditioning. And we birth that sound. We let that sound live again because the conditioning stopped it from living, stopping from going through its own natural development. And in that kind of situation, we give it a chance to be born and a chance to discover itself. And that's kind of what it is.
Wow. Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.